Some time ago I had a conversation with a friend about why I prefer talking about video games to talking about film. Now, it's not that I'm not into film at all. I love the medium more than I probably should, especially the more quirky and artsy ones. I actually even got into games primarily from the narrative side, rather than the mechanical or competitive one. I'm one of those weird people who accept a mechanical flaw in a game more easily than a narrative one. But when it comes to my online content, you might have noticed that I don't really talk a lot about film or books. Just a little bit here and there maybe, but not that much. It's not like I don't have any opinions or ideas about those things. There is so much I could talk about: Dune, David Lynch, Lovecraft or Murakami. And maybe I will at some point, but at the moment this is clearly not my main focus. And the reason for that is actually quite simple. Talking about games is, for me, way more enjoyable than talking about film or books. Off the internet, I have a handful of friends that I love to talk film with, but apart from that, I have made the experience that film buffs are really hard to talk to, especially if you don't share their opinion about certain topics. A kind of recent example would be the Barbie movie, which, spoiler alert, I didn't like that much. I actually like Greta Gerwig a lot, so maybe I had too high expectations, but when I first watched it, I was quite confused and didn't feel the movie was achieving what I felt it was trying to do, and didn't really live up to what I was expecting. But when I tried to voice that opinion online, there were a lot of people who were taking this very personally, which is something I never really experienced the same way talking about video games. And I played Dota. A lot of Dota. Now, of course, this is just my personal experience. For you, this might differ a lot. And I know there is a fair share of people, especially on the internet, who have a very strong opinion on games, especially on certain websites. But in general, I get the sense that the majority of people in games are more likely to be quite open in discussions. Having a different opinion doesn't seem to be that big of a deal, if it isn't something like very extreme. The scene seems more diverse, more talkative, and less judgmental. At least on the outside. Before I get further into that, do me a favor and like the video and leave me a comment. Those are literally the best things you can do to help me out with this channel. No money, no sales, just watch and click. That's it. And if you really like what you're seeing, you might want to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with any future stuff that I make. There is a concept that is very central to gaming, that not just influences games themselves, but also the whole culture around it. The idea of fun. Games are kind of unique in that, by their very definition, they don't have to be serious. They can be, and there are tons of examples of games that tackle very serious topics and do so brilliantly. But there is no innate need for them to do that. For a game, it's totally fine to be just fun. When I talk about games being fun, I don't refer to the seriousness of the content, like the difference between tragedies and comedies in traditional storytelling. You know, where the old Greeks thought that tragedies are serious and more suited for the upper class, while the funny comedies are for the peasants. Games have that as well, but there's also another layer that comes with the interactivity, with the fact that we are not just consuming, but actively shaping the experience. While you could argue that with enough fantasy, even Tetris has a narrative, you can technically do that with any activity. On a more practical level, most people would agree that it is neither comedic nor tragic. And it doesn't need to be. No one expects it to be. Fun might actually be the wrong word. There are a lot of people out there who claim that what we understand as fun does actually not correctly describe our experience with video games. Not everything you do in a game is necessarily fun, even if you are totally engrossed by it. If you are into game development, you might have watched one of the talks by Mark LeBlanc at the GDC, the Game Developers Conference, who is mostly known for his work on games like System Shock or Thief, and is notorious for his opinion that we should stop talking about fun when we describe why people interact with a game. And on a certain level, this is totally understandable. The first time I encountered Ornstein and Smough in the original Dark Souls, I didn't have fun, not at all. From a design perspective, I love the two of them. They make for a great boss battle, and as soon as I overcame the challenge, I felt great. But before that, I had a miserable time. I got angry, annoyed, and for a while it was better not to talk to me, unless you were looking for a snarly comment. Some people might have this vague idea of an anime character who gets beaten over and over, but finds joy in the challenge and the idea of improving. Yeah, that was definitely not me. I hated every moment of it, but somehow I still stayed engaged with it. What kept me going was a mixture of sheer stubbornness and a feeling that I know what I have to do to beat them. I just have to do it. It can't be that hard, right? Just do it. No matter how you look at it, it is safe to say that something positive is happening when you play a game, even if there is some level of frustration involved, even if it is not just fun. You could go into lengthy detail on different feelings that games invoke, but for simplicity's sake, let's just call it pleasure. What exactly gives you this pleasure varies from person to person, but it is the interaction that provides this feeling, not whichever information this interaction tries to communicate. It is the medium, not the message. There are two more theories that I quickly want to mention in that regard without actually going too much into it, and that would be self-determination theory and flow. Self-determination theory basically talks about the idea of intrinsic motivation. It talks about people doing an activity not just for some kind of external gain, like money, love, or fame. It's basically the scientific write-up of the idea that the way itself is the goal, which is very often referred to when talking about designed experiences, like, for example, video games. Intrinsic motivation is generally seen as the more favorable form of motivation. You want your game to be something that players like doing, even if you don't pay them. Which, funny enough, is basically what some service games started doing. They don't pay you in money, but in other goods like skins, character models, and so on, which has led to quite an interesting economy in some cases. Flow describes the state that you are in when you are totally engrossed in any activity, as a matter of fact. Now, I don't think that flow and intrinsic motivation are necessarily related. You don't need to be intrinsically motivated to get into flow. The activity you immerse yourself in does that all by itself, but it certainly helps to reach that state more easily and more consistently. Flow is where I believe we experience this pleasure that I was talking about earlier. This weird feeling that is not necessarily fun, but engages us in a strange, almost magical way. The feeling that keeps you pushing against the same boss over and over, even though it already utterly crushed you over 40 times. That keeps you trying to jump that gap one more time, even though you've already fallen countless times into the abyss below. Because among all the failures, it allows you to see a light. Because it allows you to vividly imagine what it would be like if you succeed. After you've done it, after you've mastered the obstacle, defeated the nemesis and saved the princess. You know that it is possible. Because you know what to do. You know exactly what to do. All there is to it is to master the execution. Who cares if you die 20, 50 or 100 times? It stings, yes, but that's about it. It's annoying, but nothing else happens. It's just a game after all. It doesn't bear any weight. Not really. If you learn about games in more of an academic setting, one of the first texts you get to read is probably Johann Huizinger's Homo Ludens, The Playing Human, which is a book all about the act of playing. Huizinger's definition of play is, up to this date, used and accepted by many scholars and game developers. And he also includes this very idea that we just heard about in self-determination theory, intrinsic motivation, even if he describes it a bit more colorful. Play is detached from the ordinary world, and therefore from its motivations. You could argue that, according to Huizinger, as soon as you put extrinsic motivations like money or social status into the mix, whatever you are doing in or with a game is actually not even play anymore. You're not playing. Playing is when you totally give yourself to the experience and decide that all those distracting things are worthless. Everything that matters in the moment are you, as you are drifting through this construct, this made-up reality, whose artificial nature you're well aware of. You even welcome it, since it gives you a sense of familiarity, of safety, like a child that keeps climbing every structure their small arms and legs can reach, without worrying that something could happen, that they could fall, since Daddy would just catch them anyway. Hell, it might even be fun to fall, just like flying. Of course, there are always people who take things too seriously. We have all seen or known a person who put an unthinkable amount of time, energy, and sometimes even money, you know, that stuff from the real world, into a game. These can be guild leaders in an MMO, dungeon masters in an RPG, or maybe just people calling themselves professional gamers, signifying that they have bridged the gap between the ordinary world and the game world, that they stepped, at least with one leg, out of this magic circle. Casual players often can't help but think, bro, chill. This is a game. But those people want to test the boundaries of the game, to break the damn barrier that keeps this made-up world from being real. And to do that, everything has to work just perfectly. Errors can't be tolerated. Sometimes in order to have fun, you have to kill the fun. Huizinga calls this heiliger Ernst, holy seriousness. You can think of it as people loading up an activity with meaning. But the meaning is artificial, it's constructed. There is no logical reason for this meaning to correspond with this activity. It might not be contradictory, sure, but correlation is not the same as causation. But this doesn't have to be a bad thing in and of itself. Meaning can be constructed. It can even be beneficial to be able to find reason and intention in something. The problem with play is that by definition, it is not tied to any extrinsic values. You shouldn't need meaning to play. However, sometimes a certain level of seriousness is necessary to keep you immersed. Play for many people is about escapism. We have touched this before. The escape from the ordinary world into a game, into this safe construct. And immersion is not about making up an illusion. People suspend their disbeliefs just fine by themselves. It is about not breaking it. This is why so many media are praised for being true to reality. Not because you actually want it to be real. You just don't want it to remind you it's fake. If a game or a story confronts you with things that blatantly don't make sense, it is very easy to just get yanked out of the experience. And this escapism is exactly why this game, this construct, is so important. Because it is your safe place. It is where you feel good, where you feel whole. And it drives you insane that no one else can see that. How can't they see that it is the rules that makes this experience so special? Can't they value this greatness? How dare they laugh? Can't they see how much better this is than whatever is outside? All this play is irritating you because you don't want this to be a game. This is what reality should be like. How can they not see? It makes you mad. All this fun, this pleasure, this unbearable lightness. If you made it to this part of the video, wow, and thank you. I know this might be a bit different to the other videos I've made so far, but I hope you still enjoyed it. I've had this topic in my head for a long time, but didn't really know how to properly write it down and get it onto video. I guess it ended up a bit more abstract, but to be honest, I'm really proud of the result, even though it took a little bit longer than usual to make. And I don't know if it will get a lot of traction. But in this case, I honestly don't really care. And I don't know, I'm just really happy I finally made this video. So if you enjoyed it too, please feel free to let me know in the comment section. And of course by pressing the like button. And you can of course also subscribe and follow me on Threads, which is where I post more spontaneous stuff. But other than that, yeah, I hope you have a great day and see you in the next video. Bye bye.